Dr. John Abbink, thank you for your willingness for this interview. Before we proceed, please introduce yourself.
I'm John Abbink. I am a professor of political anthropology and African studies at Leiden University in the Netherlands. And I've been doing quite some work in Ethiopia in anthropology, ethnic history, political relations, and religious studies.
How long have you been studying Ethiopian history and politics? What really inspired you to study Ethiopia?
I went to Ethiopia after my PhD, which was on another subject.
Oh.
So about 20, maybe even 30 years ago. Yeah, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just fascinated by Ethiopia's diversity and cultural, its long history, its interesting interactions between various regions and groups, and the many topics which still needed research, like ethnography, ethnic history. And also I was interested in the political process of change and group relation on a local level. So my perspective is really political anthropology, and for that Ethiopia is a very fascinating country, also in comparative perspective. It's a great country, fascinating country, and I often come there, and I like to come there.
How could you explain the current situation in the Horn of Africa? This time, different countries are playing great games in the region. Is it the new scramble for Africa or what?
How we explain the situation in the Horn of Africa.
Yeah.
It's a big topic. It's I don't know. It is a mixture of international community, the international community, meddling perhaps too much in terms of telling people what to do in the Horn. It is the dependency of poor countries like Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia vis-a-vis external players. It's the unresolved political problems within the countries. Look at Somalia, look at, of course, Ethiopia, but also Sudan, Eritrea, still unsolved problems, which combine to perpetuate this volatile situation. If we specifically focus on the current conflict, the armed conflict, and the terrible suffering which has ensued since last November, with a new round since late June this year. Yeah, it's a question of problematic heritage of the past, specifically in Ethiopia. Unresolved political issues, a stagnant and rather authoritarian political system which was in place. And these things have exploded, and unfortunately, it has been aggravated, I think, by somewhat uninformed or even maybe misguided meddling of foreign countries. I am myself, of course, I'm from Holland and part of the EU. I am particularly disappointed by the response and the moralizing discourse by EU, and especially by also the USA in this conflict, specifically in Ethiopia. But all these issues in Ethiopia and in Somalia also, they reflect the underlying unresolved societal and political, and also, of course, economic issues which Eastern Africa, the Horn, Northeast Africa are dealing with. And they are tenacious, they are durable, and they are not easily solved.
Why do you think, Dr. Abbink, that the West seems against the tripartite alliance of Ethiopia, Somalia, and Eritrea?
I'm not sure if they are against. The Americans go by images. They go by day-to-day messages which come in on their desks, in the foreign, in the State Department and so forth. And I don't know why. They have, of course, been great friends of the TPLF, EPRDF when they were in power. They were buddies, and they have supported them tremendously. I remember former President Obama saying that the 2015 elections were a democratic process. Well, no analyst, no one would agree with that. So there was a close link between the 27-year-old regime of the EPRDF, which has, of course, done some good things. We can't deny that, economically and so forth. But there was a close alliance between these two, and apparently they cannot take leave of them. But they don't reckon, the USA doesn't recognize that the TPLF of today is, of course, totally different from the one which was in power. I mean, has gone to another direction, not totally different, of course, because the organizing ideas are still there. but they have gone into a direction which is, when you support that or condone that, are in the long run very much against the interests, the international policy interests of the USA also. You create an unstable Horn of Africa. You create you support regional conflicts and so forth. So, sometimes I have the impression, but, I'm not an insider, that they don't really do their homework on what lies behind it, what is the political psychology of the region of Northeast Africa. And also they don't appreciate very much these days the attitude of the large majority of the Ethiopian population, specifically in this conflict. I mean, we have had an election on 21 June, and we have a second round coming up soon also of the remaining constituencies. And of course, while this election was not ideal and top and perfect, it was perfect enough, it was good enough to show that there was substantial support for Prime Minister Abiy and for the Prosperity Party. You cannot deny that, and you can't deny this fact. So it would be better to put all efforts to understand what is going on in the longer, broader strategic perspective, and work with the government in Ethiopia and try to get more into what their side of the issue is. And I'm surprised. I'm really surprised and also a bit shocked that this has not really happened. I look also at the record of the EU representatives who have been visiting the Horn, next to the US representative, Jeffrey Feltman, who has not achieved anything, I think. I'm sorry. Yeah. But you have now Joseph Borrell, of course, the EU Foreign Affairs Minister, so to speak. We have Mrs. Dr. Annette Weber, who has been visiting. I hope that they can continue to get more background information and to appreciate the longer-term strategic interests of this conflict and what lies behind it. You cannot only make foreign policy on the basis of images of famine and killing and this and that, which may or may not have been happening. As you know, from the side of the rebel, the insurgents, and also sometimes on the side of pro-government forces, there have been manipulations of images and so forth, and of photographs which are not correct. And these apparently seem much influential in influencing policy. So I'm writing a piece on this phenomenon of biased policy formation and puzzling responses by the Western donor countries. Maybe, and there I show that, there is a need for a policy reset, and because otherwise we'll be lingering with this conflict for even more months to come. But it's difficult, and it is a kind of what we call in sociology a wicked problem. This whole armed conflict. But I'm sure that in the long run, if we listen to the peoples of the region of Ethiopia, of the wider Ethiopia, and including Tigray, that some kind of solution and reconciliation process can and must be found. The problem is we can't hear much about what the Tigrayan people at large really want. I cannot imagine that they. No, I remember I was in Mekelle in October 2018, and there was a kind of surprised and open attitude towards the new policy of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. They were waiting and seeing. Many were excited that there was change to come. Many couldn't express themselves very much because TPLF is there, of course, the party in power, and they were very critical and skeptical, as we know. But at that time, in 2018, even in Mekelle, there was the impression that maybe some real good change will come. Now we can't even estimate. We can't even know what the population at large, is really feeling. The people in the countryside, the traders. Of course, we have seen images in Mekelle of cheering people when TPLF forces came back after the ceasefire of 28 June. But we have to reset. We have to rethink this whole problem from the perspective of the interest of the Ethiopian people at large.
Could Ethiopia be an obstacle for the interest of the West? I mean, in the Horn.
No, the contrary. The contrary is the case. a strong and peaceful Ethiopia under a leadership which promotes development and regional stabilization, with good relations with peaceful and stable, predictable relation between Somalia and Sudan and Eritrea and Kenya would be in the interest of the West, because it would lead to less need for humanitarian aid and less need for crisis diplomacy. It would open up markets for the West, for other countries. So no, there is only advantage in having a stable country, and interest also for the West would be. I think if you pursue an agenda of responding to incidents, to only to humanitarian issues rather than the wider picture, then you are on the wrong track. It may though be that the West, especially the USA, privileges Egypt more as a stable and strong country in Eastern and Northeastern Africa than Ethiopia at this point. There is, I think, a kind of bias there, and I find that a strategic mistake, because Egypt is also vulnerable. We don't know how vulnerable, but we may see it in the future. It is much better and we cannot also not deny the rise of Ethiopia, the population numbers, the potential in the economy. It's much to be preferred for the West also, if they think in the longer term, 20-year, 30-year perspective, to bet on Ethiopia as a rising power in that region. It does not have to go at the expense of any other power in that region.
The former EU Special Representative to the Horn, Ambassador Alex Rondos, once said that the best solution for the tension in the Horn of Africa is mutual cooperation.
Yeah, absolutely. Let him tell that he's now retired, Rondos.
Yeah,
he's now retired.
yeah.
Let him tell that again to the EU. That they can maybe tinker with their policies, adjust their policies a bit. That would be good.
This time, it's beyond obvious that the West seems supporting the TPLF. What makes it so difficult for them to strive to cooperate and support Abiy's administration?
Well, in the beginning, they were very positive. I mean, in 2018 and so forth. And there were many positive exchanges, and there were immediate promises of more developmental aid and so forth. But look, there is also an impression that African, maybe that's a bit biased of me, but there is also an impression in the West that the African countries who get support from the rich countries, they must also really listen to the Westerners. They must, in a way, be obedient. They must listen. And if you go too independent in taking care of what you as leader of a country see as the interests of your country, then there are misgivings. And this is especially clear in this conflict. In this conflict. But as I said, in the beginning, they were very much positive towards Abiy. And Abiy, if you look also at the current record still of developmental initiatives, the Green Legacy, the opening up of new projects and so forth, there is really tremendous dynamics going on, and this should continue. But now the Westerners, the USA, the EU, they see everything what happened in the country in the perspective of that conflict, rather than seeing the wider picture. But that's what I said in the beginning, the wider strategic picture. So, but there may also be a kind of lingering paternalism or idea that people dependent or countries dependent on aid must really listen to what we in our our good faith and our great ideas about development should what we are giving to them, and they should listen. But that's not going to happen. I mean, I read just yesterday. I read the response, the letter by Prime Minister Abiy to it just came after the executive order of Joe Biden, the president of the US.
The day before.
Well, that's a good letter, and I support that attitude which the Prime Minister laid out in that letter, that people who have to decide on their own country, they are responsible, and not outsiders. They are not responsible. So they should know their limits, And if you don't want to give aid, then so be it, and we say goodbye. But rather than fostering a kind of one-sided paternalist conversation. You should really develop a working partnership where, of course, the poorer country is dependent on aid and so forth, but let them decide on what is promising for the country, and how they involve the population and so forth. And in that respect, Ethiopia has made great strides in the past 3 years. You cannot deny that. So the attitude, yeah, it maybe some people speak of neo-imperialist, neo-colonialist sentiments still returning. I'm not sure if I would go so far, but there is definitely an element of paternalism and of, but it, as again, as I said in the beginning, it's based on a partial and a kind of biased appreciation of what has been going on in this conflict. And if they really get their act together and do more in-depth homework, also based on local Ethiopian sources, news media, interviews, not only on English sources and so forth, and the global media, because there if you start talking about that, then we have a whole story to tell. But they should really engage with the local sources and local resource persons, and it might lead to a gradual shift of perspective.
As an international expert on Ethiopian politics and history, how do you see the international community's reaction in the case of Ethiopia? Why do you think giant medias, humanitarian agencies, UN organizations, the EU, they all ignore the Ethiopian truth?
Yeah, there is a bias. Absolutely. It partly relates to what I said before about relying too much on certain, local fixers who are themselves biased. It is also based in a kind of response that what the government says is all lies and is not to be believed. And also it's based on really not doing enough digging into the backgrounds and into the local sources. So yeah, it has been very disappointing. Media, the global media from CNN, of course, one of the main culprits. The CNN is a total disaster. I mean, I would advise nobody now to look at CNN for news on Africa. Don't do it. It's unhealthy for you. But also Daily Telegraph, New York Times, even The Guardian, they seem to want to produce really, fascinating but sensationalist articles on what happens, with often points of truth. On both sides, there have been abuses, on part of the Federal Army in the beginning, and in the war in November, December, there have been incidents, as you know, from the report of the Attorney General, who have been indicting people. Dozens of people have been indicted for abuses by the Attorney General, by Dr. Gideon. But also, they cannot, apparently these global media, they cannot take enough time to really go into the backgrounds and tell a balanced story, or at least leave things a bit open. They want to report sensationalist issues. I'm remembering now this article a couple of months ago, I think 1.5 months ago, in a Daily Telegraph, accusing the Federal Army of using phosphorus bombs, and they showed some pictures of people with burning wounds, and they said, oh, maybe phosphor has been used. That's a very grave accusation, very grave. There is no evidence, neither in the article nor subsequently, of phosphorus bombs having been used. But in the meantime, it's in the media, and people pick it up, and people start making additional accusations on the Federal Army. Such things are pernicious, are not useful. If you are not sure that such bombs or such things have occurred, why produce it? So there, I mean, the professionalism and the in-depth, research which is needed to report on such an extremely complex conflict is lacking, and that is surprising. But that's how the media work, also partly. So we have to reckon with more of these things, and we have to possibly from Ethiopia also, of course, primarily from Ethiopian sources themselves, going in the field, interviewing people, showing images, that these messages which appear in the world press are not really true, not really reliable, because they really help.
What is the Western world getting wrong about TPLF? Could TPLF be a threat to the Horn of Africa?
Well, it is already a threat currently. It is already the source of major instability. It has aggravated relations between Sudan and Ethiopia. There is prevarication between Somalia and Ethiopia, but especially this, and Ethiopia and Egypt, of course. Egypt has been not playing a very constructive role here. So it is already a source of instability. Secondly, they forget the record of the TPLF when they were in power.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were indications that not all things were going so well, that repression was substantial, that although there was economic growth and so forth, and GDP growth, that the political model was running into the sands. There was a lot of trouble because of corruption and things going wrong, and think of these huge sugar plantations in the southwest. Think of the enormous delay with the Grand Renaissance Dam. It was delayed forever and ever, and financial malversation was also there. So many things did not go so very well. There was unequal development in the country, but and then the West also forgets how independent, how strong Tigray already was as a regional state in Ethiopia. They were autonomous. They were very strong as a state, as an autonomous state. So the rights of the Tigrayan elite and the Tigrayan people nominally were already respected within the federal order of the last few years. Also on the time that the conflict started in November. So the Western media or the Western policymakers do not appreciate the strength which the TPLF and the Tigray region already had within the federation, and they also thereby ignored the long record, more than a year of negotiations which were occurring between the federal government and the Tigrayan government to normalize or to redefine their relationship. After TPLF said, we don't want to join the Prosperity Party, we are going to have our own elections and so forth. So they did many things which were against the federal order. Still, there was more than a year of negotiation. You remember all these people going there, religious delegations of women from all kinds walks of life from Ethiopia, from the central of Ethiopia, went to Debrecen in Mekelle to ask, please do not take the confrontational routes. It may lead to war. Please keep engaged, try to negotiate and so forth. We should remember that there was a road towards conflict, and the opening of the conflict itself was, a TPLF act. We know the statement by Sekou Touré on Tigray Media House. He admitted it. These things should not be forgotten. It was a major an illegal insurgency, I think. We cannot deny that, which has endangered the country, which has endangered the Tigrayan people, and now also the rest of Ethiopia in the adjacent Afar and Wollo regions. So this is rather an important aspect, the political side of it. It has a history, and we should remember that history. We cannot now only in the West, we cannot act on all these incidents which we see, these terrible incidents and the hunger and so forth and the humanitarian issues. We have to see the political context of it, and that is what the Western people involved, the observers and the policymakers, are not really doing such a good job.
Do you think the current Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, pull out Ethiopia from the current crisis and make Ethiopia prosperous and great again?
Well, I hope so. Well, I am impressed by Abiy. I'm impressed by him. He has capacity, he has the intelligence, of course, and he has done already so many things. The point is, he has to broaden cooperation with all stakeholders in the country. He has to carefully choose his rhetoric. But he has great popularity, and if you ask me straight, is there another leader who could take over at this point in Ethiopia? I say, I'm sorry, no, I can't see anybody of this kind of stature. But and he has an extremely good team around him. He's not the only one ruling the government, ruling the country. He has a very broad team. of experts, young people, skilled people, you know, really scientifically well-formed people around him, and also in the regions, in the Oromia region, in the Amara region, in Afar region, Somali region, great people with quality who believe in a new Ethiopia and who want to work together with the Prosperity Party and Abiy Ahmed. So there, I think there are still great prospects. You know, at this point, it's a country with a lot of problems, of course, a lot of challenges. We see the problem of the OLF or the OLA in western Ethiopia, in Oromia. We see protests. We see the Tigray issue, of course. But you know, the central government is strong enough and capable enough to do its job. Really, I mean. And we should not only look at the military side, that they might eventually win this war and so forth. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about governance. I'm talking about developmental strategies. There has been a huge reset of the whole national developmental and political agenda since April 2018. But really, I'm sure that the majority of the people from whatever backgrounds see more advantage in a kind of working federal Ethiopia, where regions and people work together because they are so intertwined, rather than secession. The secession issue is, you know, it would be a huge challenge. You would, first of all, you would drop in your wealth. You would drop to a poverty level and to a political level, which is not going to help you at all. It would only, you know, empower and enrich maybe the local elites of such ethno regions. For the rest, it wouldn't be a good idea.
This will be my last question, Dr. John Abbink. What in the game of the current confrontation and the best ideal solution to the crisis? What's your fear and hope?
My fear is that the conflict will go on longer than necessary, causing suffering both in Tigray and in Wollo and Afar and so forth. It should somehow be brought to an end.
Oh.
Whether that will happen and how, that is the question. Eh? You can have several options. You could have the option, you know, crushing military victory by the federal army. You could have, you know, mutually agreed secession of Tigray from Ethiopia, or you could have a kind of negotiated reset of the relationship between the regional state of Tigray with the federal Ethiopia. Of course, the last one option would be the best, but how? With whom do you negotiate? That's of course the question. Yeah. The federal government is not going anywhere. Of course, they will stay put, and they are you know, they have been elected, so and they can, you know, they have to think about their strategy in the longer term. I mean, not only the military option. But on the side of the Tigray, the TPLF and so forth, or the Tigray region as a whole, there we have to seek for, you know, a new partner for constructive dialogue. Who are they? I cannot imagine that you nicely sit down with people now leading the TPLF on a negotiating table. They have been, you know, so negative and often hateful even towards the rest of Ethiopia and towards the federal government. I don't know how one can really negotiate with them. But so that would take time, unless they make a vote fast, you know, unless they make a change of position totally and rethink their entire strategy. This would be a great stretch. But preferably there should be, you know, a reach out to other parts of Tigray society, other parts of the Tigray intellectuals and leaders, wherever they are, maybe in Tigray or outside, to forge a new kind of forum for dialogue about a constructive solution to the problem. So you cannot do it with the same personnel which has made this war, as I said, but maybe with other people and with a kind of open program to reset the relationship between this region of Tigray. It's such an interesting and fascinating and integral part of Ethiopia and federal Ethiopia. I hope that somehow is going to be realized.
This is all I have for today, and thank you for your in-depth analysis, Dr. John Abbink. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you.